The Great Sphinx of Giza has graced our globe for more than 4,500 years. That monumental ancient Egyptian structure, which consists of the body of a lion and the head of a human being, has fascinated mankind for countless centuries. Although the Sphinx is undoubtedly one of the most famous structures in history, the ancient structure still holds many unsolved mysteries to this day. What purpose did the stone colossus once serve? How has the statue, which is over 70 meters long, changed over time? And what undiscovered secrets might have been slumbering inside the Great Sphinx of Giza for hundreds of years? A city under the Sphinx. In 1935, archaeological interest in the ancient Egyptian sites was very high, as many untold secrets of this mysterious city had still been undiscovered. At that point, it wasn't even 15 years earlier that the British explorer Howard Carter had found the tomb of the legendary King Tutankhamun, which had been hidden from the view of modern man for more than 3,000 years. A few years later, the world of archaeologists was shaken by another, no less spectacular piece of news. Rumors spread that some researchers had found the remains of a 1,000-year-old, previously completely unknown city below the desert sands of the Giza Plateau. While the sensational reports were initially printed in a wide variety of newspapers around the world, public interest in this groundbreaking discovery mysteriously and abruptly ended shortly thereafter. So it seemed as if the Egyptologists' attention had suddenly returned to the time-honored royal tombs and their precious treasures. From today's perspective, the question arises as to why such an important find, such as that of a 4,000-year-old underground city, receded so much into the background practically overnight. Particularly explosive was that the access to the village underground is said to have been inside the world-famous Sphinx. Whether this report was ultimately a leaked secret or a made-up fairy tale is still the subject of heated debates to this day. What is certain is that the existence of such a tunnel, which leads to a secret city, has often been vehemently denied by officials. On the other hand, there are many photos that apparently show that the body of the Sphinx is adorned with mysterious shafts and chambers. When asked, the official authorities always point out that it's simply not possible to look into these mysterious passages because they're either buried or filled with water. In fact, some exploratory drilling has been carried out in the Sphinx's bedrock in the past to check whether there's a previously undiscovered underground structure underneath the statue. However, as the Egyptian Antiquities Authority feared that the millennia-old structure could be severely damaged in the course of this work, further exploratory drilling was quickly prohibited. However, we must mention a strange secret that seems to have slipped through the minds of many people. According to YouTuber Bright Insight, he believes that there was a shaft that was located on the head of the Great Sphinx that likely led down inside of the statue. If this is true, this shaft could have also served as an entrance to the underground city. The YouTuber, who's revealed heaps of information about ancient Egypt and other archaeological sites in recent years, explains that aerial photos from the early 1900s show what appears to be a shaft on the head of the Sphinx. However, more recent photos show what appears to be a hole that has been covered with concrete. If this is true, the implications of such a discovery could be out of this world. If, for example, we learn that the supposed shaft has now been covered up, it would essentially prove that the Egyptian government is taking part in a massive cover-up operation. While this is quite a lofty suggestion, stranger things have certainly happened. After all, for many years it's been alleged that the pyramids served as tombs for the wealthy leaders of Egypt. However, no such mummies have ever been located inside of the pyramids. In fact, there's no evidence whatsoever that the pyramids served as burial chambers. This seems to have been a myth that historians coined over time. Thus, anything is technically possible in the world of Egyptian history. Enigmatic representations. One of the most important clues pointing to a secret entrance into the Sphinx with an unknown destination is a drawing from the late 18th century. In the corresponding picture, the head of the colossal statue is clearly decorated with a hole from which even a man is pulled out. But even the staunchest supporters of the underground city theory find it difficult to cite a simple sketch as unchallengeable evidence. On the other hand, an aforementioned aerial photograph of the Sphinx, which was taken from a hot air balloon in the 1920s and also suggests such an opening at the top of the building, is much more valid. What's particularly puzzling is the fact that the statue's skull is clearly different from the rest of the body. The human head appears unusually small in relation to the lion's body. The reason for these striking proportions hasn't yet been deciphered. Some experts believe that the Great Sphinx of Giza originally had a much different, larger head. However, this thesis is also supported by the fact that the skull appears significantly less weathered than the rest of the statue, even though the head, unlike the rest of the body, wasn't covered by protective layers of sand for centuries. While we don't know why the Sphinx head appears so unique, it's possible that it could have been a large statue of a lion in the beginning. However, as Egypt changed hands over the course of thousands of years, one of the Egyptian rulers may have commissioned the head to be changed to his likeness. While we have no evidence for such a theory, it would certainly be within the realm of possibility. A deliberate concealment. Some people take this line of thought even further. Some consider it probable that a second statue once existed next to the current Sphinx of Giza. In fact, it wasn't uncommon in ancient Egyptian customs to have two stone lions acting as guards to the gate to the afterlife. In detail, there are even some centuries-old sketches showing a Giza plateau with not just one, but two stone skulls sticking out of the desert sand. An ominous mound of sand near the Sphinx is therefore consistently credited with covering its buried, forgotten counterpart. However, the official request to examine the sand hill in question using modern measuring instruments have always remained unanswered by the official authorities. Some people suspect that the state authorities have long known about the existence of a second Sphinx and a hidden city below the Giza plateau. If you follow this line of thought, however, the institutions are keen to keep these facts secret at all costs. Is there something slumbering beneath the desert sands that would change history forever? Did the Egyptians have secret knowledge or advanced technology that we're not supposed to see? Or are all of these assumptions nothing but exciting but misleading theories? Tell us what you think about it in the comments. It would certainly make sense for the Egyptian government to conceal certain aspects of the country's history. After all, you have to keep in mind that tourism is a main source of finances for the Egyptian government. The big reason tourists continue to flock to the area is because of the mystery surrounding the strange statues that have been left behind by the ancient Egyptians. If these mysteries were to be finally solved, you can expect that tourism would see a sharp decline, effectively cutting into the funds of the government and threatening the country as a whole. Thus, it would be in their best interest to keep certain aspects of history a secret. The question of the nose. While the mystery of a second Sphinx and an underground facility eludes our direct view, one specific riddle surrounding the huge statue is immediately recognizable to everyone: the broken nose. Over the centuries, the mystery of the missing nose has fueled so much speculation that it became a kind of running gag in pop culture works as well. Those of you who are older will surely remember the famous scene from Asterix and Cleopatra, in which Obelix accidentally breaks the statue's nose while climbing it. But leaving aside the amusing explanations from the world of cartoons and comics, what really happened to the Sphinx's nose? A widespread legend has it that the ancient Egyptian structure was fired upon and damaged by Napoleon's soldiers during artillery drills. However, a copper engraving of the Sphinx, which was made in 1738 by the Danish artist Frederick Ludwig Norden, already shows the Colossus without a nose and speaks against this theory. It's more likely that the statue lost its nose several centuries earlier. During the Arab period, the Great Sphinx of Giza was decried as the father of terror in the ranks of devout Muslims. The group still practiced at the time, worshipping the building as a deity, and was detested by some Muslims as blasphemous idolatry. According to a report by Arab historian al-Maghrizi, a devout sheikh's hatred of the Sphinx eventually culminated in him beating off the statue's nose in 1378 in a fit of rage. The man is said to have been lynched by an angry crowd. The Hall of Records. As we've told you before, some people suspect that the Sphinx's head was once adorned with a secret passage leading to a hidden underground city. According to an old legend, however, there's another hidden gate in the immediate vicinity of the Sphinx, which reveals the entrance to the so-called Hall of Records. According to this myth, there's an ancient library that houses practically all the secrets of knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. Other people even assume that the Hall of Records contain the collected works of another civilization that's completely unknown today. Access to this hidden treasure of knowledge is said to be in front of the Sphinx's paws. Although most people dismiss these legends as modern wives' tales, some American researchers wanted to get to the bottom of the exciting tales once and for all. Therefore, the experts dug 7 meters deep into the ground in front of the paws of the statue. Although the men failed to uncover a secret tunnel, seismic measurements indicated the existence of chambers beneath the Sphinx. Officially, however, these could simply be natural cavities, since excavations, drilling, and blasting always harbored the risk of damaging the Sphinx. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority prohibited all further research projects. However, once again, we must entertain the idea that they may have canceled these excavations for more obvious reasons, such as them potentially being detrimental to the country's finances. What was the Sphinx for? Considering the fact that the Great Sphinx of Giza is one of the most prominent structures from antiquity, it seems all the more incredible that we can't say today what purpose the impressive hybrid creature of man and big cat once served. In the world of Egyptologists, a wide variety of explanations for this extremely exciting question have come up over time. On the one hand, it's conceivable that the Sphinx was intended to guard and protect the Giza Plateau. Other historians do not see a stone guardian in the statue, but the image of an ancient Egyptian deity, such as the sky god Horus. However, the Sphinx may also show an idealized form of the pharaoh Chephren, who was also regarded as a divine being among the ancient Egyptian population. Whatever the true inspiration may be behind the Sphinx, we may never know. The truth is, there's certainly a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to the relics of ancient Egypt. There's surely a wealth of information and knowledge that's just waiting to be discovered, but for one reason or another, we seem to be forbidden from digging deeper, both physically and metaphorically speaking. A mysterious group of artifacts. We all know that the Sphinx is currently located fairly close to the Pyramid of Giza. Today, these two structures stand just on the outskirts of Cairo. However, many thousands of years ago, these two structures likely stood independent of one another, essentially being placed in the middle of the desert. For many years, it was widely assumed that the pyramids were used as burial chambers for elite Egyptian rulers. Because of this, many people began to refer to the Sphinx as the watchdog for Pharaoh Cheops' tomb. However, in more recent years, Egyptologists have begun to realize that there are no references to Egyptian burial practices found inside any of the pyramids. This essentially disproves the theory that these structures would have been used as tombs. Thus, this also disproves that the Sphinx had anything to do with Pharaoh Cheops or the pyramid that has been attributed to him. The pyramids have been rumored to have been used for countless things. Some people claim that both the Sphinx and the pyramids are magical places that may hold mysteries and uses that our minds simply cannot understand. Some people claim the pyramids would have been used for the generation of power or to harness the cosmic forces. Other researchers claim to have evidence that the structures would have been used to produce electricity or to harness electromagnetic energy. The honest truth is, we have no idea what they were used for. We also don't know why the Sphinx was built alongside them. However, in a more interesting historical twist, there's quite a bit of evidence that claims that the Sphinx may have been built many years before the pyramids. This hasn't been definitively proven yet, but researchers are getting closer and closer to an answer. If this is true, it could turn the entire history of ancient Egypt on its head. Time will tell. Is the Sphinx a building or a statue? One of the most pressing questions that researchers have is whether or not the Sphinx is simply a large monument, or if it may contain something buried deep inside. One of the strangest things that almost anyone will notice about the Sphinx is its unique size and shape. While certain photos make the Sphinx look incredibly large, it's actually quite small when compared to its surroundings. Researchers say that the Sphinx is approximately 20 meters high at its tallest point, meaning it's about 65 feet tall. With this in mind, the paws of the Sphinx are only slightly taller than the average adult male. Interestingly, the proportions of the Sphinx do not match up with a modern lion, meaning that there may be more hidden away inside of the 73-meter-long monument than some researchers would like us to believe. Some historians say that certain ancient documents lead them to believe that the Sphinx could have previously been a mysterious place of worship. Legends began to grow over many years that the Sphinx may have rooms hidden away inside, with some researchers saying that ancient texts lead them to believe that the Sphinx is now the dwelling place of a dark entity. Other sources claim that the Sphinx is the home to infinite knowledge, but we just don't know for sure. However, one thing has become abundantly clear to all researchers. Whatever the Sphinx's true purpose was, it was not designed to simply be a beautiful monument. It served an integral purpose in ancient Egyptian culture. We just haven't figured out what that purpose is just yet. How old is the Great Sphinx of Giza? This is where things get incredibly interesting, so buckle up because we're about to take you for a wild ride. How old is the Sphinx? Well, for the moment, we don't know for sure. For many years, history books around the world claimed that the Sphinx would have been built sometime during the 4th dynasty. If this is true, then the Sphinx would have been created sometime between 2613 and 2494 BC, making it just under 5,000 years old today. However, there was never any evidence found that would suggest that this information is accurate. From what we can tell, these estimates were just guesswork by early Egyptologists. However, in the years since these claims, we've learned that there's a large chance the Sphinx is far older than we've been led to believe. If the Sphinx were to have been built around 2500 BC, then it would have been created in the image of King Chephren. However, when researchers began to uncover artistic depictions of this king, they found that the structure bore no resemblance to him whatsoever. This meant that the Sphinx must have been built in a different time period. As experts began taking a much closer look at the Sphinx, they learned something else that was just as mysterious. They found evidence of water erosion near the base of the Sphinx. This is important because, as far as we know, this area of Egypt has been a sandy desert for thousands of years. However, if the water erosion at the base of the Sphinx is to be believed, that would mean the Sphinx must have been built many years before Egypt turned into the desert that we know it as today. This would place the construction of the Sphinx as far back as 7,000 to 10,000 years if historians are accurate. However, certain biblical accounts would place the Sphinx somewhere around 6,000 years old. Regardless of which date you believe, one thing is for sure: the Great Sphinx was built many, many years before the pyramids were created. This would mean that the ancient Egyptians we've come to know and love may have created their own history and cities on top of cities that had already existed. Rather than the Sphinx and the pyramids being created by the same people, they were likely created by two entirely different cultures, thousands of years apart. Holes in the Sphinx. What you may not know about the Sphinx is that many times over the years, researchers have done their best to take a look inside of the structure, but they've always come back empty-handed. In the early 1800s, a researcher tried to bore a hole into the back of the Sphinx, about 4 feet behind its head. However, as he was doing this, the drill became stuck and he stopped his efforts so as not to damage the Sphinx any further. By the 1970s, another researcher had come along and removed the stuck drill. He didn't find anything interesting when inspecting the drilled hole. However, one aspect of the Sphinx that's often overlooked is that many people claim that there was a hole in the top of the Sphinx that has since been sealed with concrete. This is a difficult theory to discuss because much of the evidence backing up this theory is trivial at best. In essence, some researchers say that in 1920, aerial photos were taken of the Sphinx. Allegedly, these photos show a large hole on top of the Sphinx. If you were to examine this area nowadays, you can see that a large circular hole has seemingly been sealed shut with modern cement. Some have speculated that this hole would have formerly been an entrance into the head of the Sphinx, but we just don't know for sure. It's possible that these older photos were doctored in later years, though it's equally possible that there really did used to be a large hole in the head of the Sphinx, and Egyptologists are doing their best to keep the truth hidden. It's possible that some researchers already know what's inside the Sphinx, as they've seen it firsthand. There's a chance that whatever they found in there, they wanted to seal it away so that no human would ever have to set foot in there again. What do mystics and other researchers say? This is, once again, where things begin to get very strange and otherworldly. One of the most well-known researchers who has spoken about the potential hidden truth of the Sphinx is named Edgar Cayce. He made claims more than 100 years ago that he had heard of a hidden library that was buried deep beneath one of the Sphinx's paws. He said that this library had come to be known as the Hall of Records, and that it would contain all sorts of ancient information, potentially explaining the construction of the pyramids as well as the Sphinx itself. If these claims are true, they would perfectly align with the records of the Rosicrucians, a secret society that has been lost to time. These documents were published for the first time more than 100 years ago, and according to them, the Sphinx was being used to contain all sorts of valuable information about the Egyptians, ensuring that their history and lineage would live on for countless years. In 1989, a team of researchers from Japan wanted to find out once and for all what was located beneath the Sphinx. They began digging around the Sphinx, specifically around the paws, and they didn't find anything worth mentioning. However, another man claims to have caught wind of a secret that had been found beneath the Sphinx that the researchers were ordered to cover up. This is where things get weird. The researchers say that beneath one of the paws, the researchers found a deep shaft that led beneath the monument. Around this area, they found a clay pot with a rope that had been coiled in the center. He says that a secret research group that had been created by the government was ordered to look inside to see what they could find. Once these researchers made their way inside, they allegedly found a mysterious field of light that none of them were able to pass through. In essence, they were stopped by a bright door that could not be opened, no matter how much they tried. A mystic from this time period claimed to know how to open the door, but these rumors claim that what the researchers found led them to seal up the shaft and never enter it again, very similar to what allegedly happened near the head of the monument. Is there a city under the Sphinx? There have been unofficial reports spread over the years that make claims about an underground city that's located beneath the Sphinx. According to these reports, there are rumors of a 12-story building that was found underneath the Sphinx, with this building being filled with Egyptian historical records, valuables, and many other priceless artifacts. It's said that this building would have had tunnels that would lead to other nearby areas, essentially creating an underground network that would by all means function as a modern city. If this is true, there could have been an entire culture of people living beneath the Sphinx, and there may still be remnants of them to this day. Obviously, this is pure speculation, but the idea isn't as crazy as you may think. After all, underground cities and buildings have been unearthed from ancient cultures all around the world. Though the question must be asked, why would the modern Egyptian government want to keep these discoveries hidden from the public eye? Did they manage to find information that may alter the course of humanity? Edgar Cayce claimed many years ago that the mythical Hall of Records could be found beneath the right paw of the Sphinx. Interestingly, this is exactly where the team of Japanese researchers began digging all those years later. It was here that they allegedly found the aforementioned shaft and pot. Edgar claims that the Sphinx could have formerly housed more than 5 million people, belonging to an ancient culture that lived thousands of years before the Common Era. Some researchers even go as far as to claim that to this day, a mystical race of highly intelligent light beings live beneath the Sphinx, simply waiting for their day to emerge.
Hidden Chamber. It is the year 2017 when a real shock runs through the ranks of the experts. As a modern Muron scan revealed, a secret chamber has been hiding in the mighty Cheops Pyramid the whole time. A look at the amazing dimensions show that this is by no means just a small niche. The mysterious cavity is at least 30 meters long. Located above the Great Gallery, the hidden chamber still poses many mysteries. In fact, we do not know what purpose this room once served, but according to the researchers, it is unlikely that there are mummies or valuable treasures here. We may be dealing here with the relic of a ramp on which the heavy blocks of stone were once heaved up. The true background of the discovery, however, resembles a mystery, and it will probably remain so indefinitely. According to this, the experts could not discover access to the secret chamber on their Muron scans, and simply pre-drilling into the cavity could affect the statics of the entire pyramid. Lost Golden City. Aside from the impending discovery of the lost Egyptian labyrinth, if we turn back the wheel of time by around 3,400 years, we find ourselves in an epic that still puzzles experts to this day. At that time, the pharaoh Akhenaten decided to give up his religion and the former capital in Thebes in order to found the city of Akhenaten and become the city's ruler. There, he ruled together with his wife Nefertiti and founded a mysterious sun cult. But what motives could have led the pharaoh to take such a drastic step? The answer to this riddle may be hidden in the ruins of the legendary Golden City, which were rediscovered in September 2020. In light of the astonishingly good state of preservation in which the remains of the magnificent village were found, the entire professional world went into a frenzy upon the discovery. In fact, experts have called the discovery of the city ruins the biggest sensation since the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. In detail, the Golden City was built during the reign of Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep III. The epic describes a chapter in which ancient Egypt was in a real heyday. This was a time of extraordinary luxury, wealth, and power. Although the investigation of the site is still in full swing, researchers have already unearthed some incredible artifacts. Jewelry, amulets, ceramics, and countless everyday objects give a foreshadowing of the priceless treasures that may lie within the remains of the Golden City. But the buildings also give us an authentic insight into everyday life at the time. According to this, the archaeologists have already found homes that may have once been occupied by workers, a kitchen, a bakery, administration buildings, and even a burial ground with burial chambers carved directly into the rock. After Akhenaten had turned his back on the flourishing town, for whatever reason, the Golden City seemed to have been used again by Tutankhamun at some point during history. The subsequent ruler must have valued the city, which represented the prosperity of his empire so well. In fact, some findings suggest that the town was inhabited until the 7th century AD. The city was then left to its own devices for many centuries, before it recently saw the light of day again. Khufu ship. The Cheops or Khufu ship gives us a vivid insight into the death cult of the ancient Egyptians. According to the beliefs of the time, death was by no means the end. It was merely the beginning of the mystical journey that, in the best case, would lead to the attainment of the kingdom of heaven. In order for the deceased to be able to reach the afterlife, a wide variety of accessories and tools were placed in the grave. This also includes the world-famous Cheops ship, a so-called sunbark, which is one of the best preserved ships of antiquity. However, when archaeologists rediscovered the ship in 1954 in a sealed pit in Giza, it had been dismantled into all of its individual parts. However, this was not a random heap of rubble. The more than 1,200 individual parts were arranged in a logical order that made it possible to later put the ancient object back together perfectly. Some traces indicate that the boat was actually used for shipping. Possibly, this was done to transport the body of Cheops from Memphis to Giza. In addition, it is conceivable that the powerful pharaoh used the ship during his lifetime to head for sacred places. Particularly interesting, if the Cheops ship were launched today, it would still be fully functional. Apries stone. The archaeologists invest vast amounts of time and money in their exciting search for clues, and it could be so much easier. According to this, a simple farmer showed last year how quickly things can go. When the farmer in northeast Egypt was busy preparing his land for sowing, he unexpectedly came across an artistically worked sandstone slab, which later turned out to be an artifact from the time of Pharaoh Apries. Accordingly, the 2.3-meter high and a good 1-meter wide stele was made approximately 2,600 years ago. In detail, the object adorned with 15 lines of hieroglyphs, which the experts are now trying to translate. Rosetta Stone. It is July 15, 1799, when a French officer manages to recover an ancient artifact in the Nile Delta. According to one story, however, it wasn't the military commander who tracked down the landmark object, but his horse. This had stumbled over the structure because it was half sticking out of the ground. Whatever the case, it is clear that we owe a lot to the so-called Rosetta Stone. As part of an inscribed tablet, the find made a significant contribution to the decoding of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. This is mainly due to the fact that the text is available in 3 different versions: in hieroglyphs, in Demotic script, and in Greek. In detail, the tablet was made in such a way that it could be deciphered by 3 population groups. The hieroglyphs were aimed at the priests, the Demotic script at the officials, and the Greek letters at the foreign rulers of the time. If you like, the Rosetta Stone served as kind of a royal homage. The texts tell of all the great deeds accomplished by Pharaoh Ptolemy V. The Silver Pharaoh. As the 3rd pharaoh of the 21st dynasty, Sesens, I ruled between the years of 1040 and 994 BC. During his reign, the king built magnificent temples dedicated to the gods Mut, Amun, and Crones. In 1940, the French archaeologist Pierre Montet managed to rediscover the tomb of the powerful ruler in Tanis. In addition to the king, his wife, a prince, and an important priest were laid to rest in it. In detail, after his death, Sesens I was not placed in just 1, but in 3 sarcophagi. The first coffin was made of rose granite and originally belonged to Pharaoh Meneptah. Beneath it slumbered a black granite sarcophagus, also reused, that encased the object that eventually gave Sesens his official nickname, a coffin of pure silver adorned with precious gold ornaments. While the sarcophagi and precious grave goods are still in amazing condition after all this time, the king mummy was not so lucky. It had already been completely disintegrated by the time the tomb was opened. Unfinished obelisk. To get closer to this exciting mystery, it is worth taking a closer look at some of the ancient structures. First of all, let's take a look at the famous unfinished obelisk located in Aswan near the Sudanese border. Historians suspect that it was ruler Hatshepsut who approved the construction of the magnificent stone pillar. If the object had been completed, it would have become the largest obelisk of antiquity, with a height of almost 42 meters and a weight of around 1,170 tons. In the end, 2 urgent questions arise. Which tools were used by the Egyptians to shape the massive stone monument? And how were the workers going to manage to erect the structure, which weighed several tons? The majority of archaeologists believe that round dolerite hammers were the most important tools of that time. Basically, in order to beat a material into shape, it is always advisable to use a tool that is harder than the object that is being processed. In the case of rose granite, of which the unfinished obelisk is made, this is not the case. In fact, both materials are roughly the same hardness. Bronze, the other tool used in ancient Egypt, is in turn significantly softer than rose granite. Another point that puzzles some experts is the small area of the trench in which the obelisk was machined. There was very little space there to perform hard machine strokes. Therefore, some researchers are sure that the ancient workplace provides an authentic impression of which methods could not be used for processing. Conversely, it also gives an indication of the unique technical level of Egyptian architecture, which, however, eludes our understanding. To this day, we have never determined how much a remarkable piece of artwork was created. By all means, the tools to craft such a perfect specimen simply didn't exist at that time. Hatshepsut's tomb. Where is the mummy of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Hatshepsut? The exciting question remained unanswered for decades before the Egyptian Minister of Education, Baruch Hosni, announced an absolute world sensation in 2007. According to this, a team of experts managed to identify the queen's mummy using DNA analysis and a CT scan. In detail, it was a body that was found in the Valley of the Kings in the early 20th century. The detailed investigation revealed that Hatshepsut probably lived to be 35 and died of cancer or complications from diabetes. In the meantime, however, the identification has been questioned again. According to this, a single tooth which is attributed to the queen does not fit into the gap in the mummy's upper jaw. So it was that a widespread theory once again receives new fuel. The pharaoh was allegedly murdered for political reasons, and her body was then cleared out of the way. Electromagnetic energy. A few years ago, researchers announced a real sensation. Electromagnetic energy can be generated inside and below Cheops Pyramid. In our modern everyday life, electromagnetic fields are a constant companion. It doesn't matter whether we're using our mobile phones, using a microwave, or sunbathing. The invisible energy surrounds us practically everywhere. Using a theoretical model, the experts calculated that using the electromagnetic fields can be concentrated under the ground and inside the Great Pyramid. However, it should be mentioned that this is a purely theoretical study that requires certain assumptions. This indeed, among other things, that the structure does not hide any other unknown cavities, and that the building material is distributed in the same way everywhere. Extraterrestrial jewelry. The fact that iron jewelry was found in the ancient Egyptian tomb does not sound like a sensation at first. However, the discovery is made all the more exciting when we realize that the material used was literally not from this world. A scientific study proved that the iron in the pearls was extracted from a meteorite. In our days, iron is considered a rather practical, not particularly valuable material. In ancient Egypt, however, the metal was more valuable than gold and precious stones. For a long time, the inhabitants of the pharaohs were unable to smelt iron. The rare cases when the material fell from heaven to earth like a gift from the gods were all the more significant. Bubastis. Forget the hilarious cat videos circulating the internet these days. When it comes to the question of cat worship, no other people can match the ancient Egyptians. The city of Bubastis was considered the cult center for the goddess Bastet. Within mythology, the cat goddess was considered the daughter of the sun god Ra. It should therefore come as no surprise that numerous bronze cat figures and even large cat cemeteries have been found in the ruins of Bubastis. After their death, many cats were specially transported to Bubastis, mummified, and buried in holy graves.
Colossal mystery. Probably. Approximately. Estimated. Whoever deals with the official technical texts on the world-famous Cheops Pyramid quickly realizes that the corresponding sources are bursting with vague formulations, which leave some room for interpretation. As mentioned at the beginning of this article, the question of the pyramid's construction is the focus of heated debate. Although there are various theories about this, which are mainly based on different ramp systems, none of them can really be proven. And did you know, for example, that only 3 artifacts were recovered from the Cheops Pyramid? In 1872, the Scottish engineer Wayneman Dixon found a sphere, a hook, and a fragment of cedar wood. Of the sarcophagus in the so-called King's Chamber, it is said that the king was probably buried here. However, a mummy or precious burial objects were not to be discovered there. This is due to the fact that the pyramid was probably looted hundreds of years ago. As a result of the scanty evidence, some people reject the theory that the structure was really built in honor of the pharaoh Cheops. Even more, some people see in the pyramid not even a tomb, but a kind of ancient power station. Furthermore, the official age dating of about 4,500 years is sometimes strongly doubted. Some people suspect that the stone colossus was built several millennia earlier. However, given all the unanswered questions and controversies swirling around the Great Pyramid of Giza, let's not lose sight of the things we know about the stunning monumental structure. It is an absolute masterpiece. Just think about it. In a time when the Egyptians had no modern technologies, not even using the chariot wheel, they managed to create a structure for eternity. But that's not all. It's not only the massive dimensions of the pyramid that leave us open-mouthed, but also its unrivaled precision. According to this, it is aligned exactly according to the 4 cardinal points, and the difference in the 4 edge lengths is not even 1/1000th. Enigmatic finds. Did you know that the so-called Queen's Chamber is actually not what its name implies? In fact, this term, which is still in use today, goes back to a misinterpretation from Arab times. The background of the shafts in that very cavity appears no less diffuse. Situated at a height of about 1.5 meters, they have a diameter of just 20 centimeters. And in fact, it was not until 1872 that the previously sealed passages were rediscovered and forcibly opened by Wayneman Dixon. In the course of this, the Scotsman came across those 3 artifacts we mentioned earlier in the front part of the northern shaft. Commonly, the objects are interpreted as so-called model grave goods, which would serve Cheops in the afterlife as tools. But why then were the objects placed in a sealed shaft? And why did modern radiocarbon dating reveal that the wooden fragments, long thought to be lost by the way, and only resurfaced in a Scottish museum in 2020, are several hundred years older than the pyramid itself? One theory, which is not particularly valid, is that the wood was reused by the Egyptians because the raw material was as rare as it was precious at the time. However, some people believe that the great age of the artifact suggests that the Pyramid of Khufu itself was built significantly earlier than most experts believe. Exciting discoveries. Be that as it may, after just under 20 meters, the northern shaft is blocked by an iron bar. You wonder what this barrier is all about? Well, we have no idea. Officially, it is said that it might have been left behind by Dixon when he explored the passages. With this in mind, Rudolf Gantenbrink and his colleagues decided in 1993 to focus their attention first on the southern shaft. After just under 2.3 meters, this shaft makes a steep turn of 40 degrees. About 57 meters further on, the robot vehicle that was let in was then confronted with a polished limestone block. Since this is adorned by 2 heavily weathered copper fittings, some observers recognize a kind of door in it. In order to finally look behind the stone closure, the blockage was supposed to be drilled through in 2002. However, the explorers discovered only another small cavity here, which probably embodies the end of the shaft. 2002 was also the year in which the northern shaft was further investigated. And here too, the experts traced a stone block fitted with copper fittings that made further progress impossible. In the end, it would take until 2011 before the blocking stone and the small chamber behind it were again scrutinized. With the help of the robot Jetty, which was equipped with a movable endoscope, the experts made some exciting discoveries. For example, the new all-around view revealed that the back of the barrier is also polished smooth, with copper fittings forming 2 eyelets there. In addition, Jetty caught some red markings on the floor of the small chamber, but what their backgrounds are all about is uncertain. They are construction worker graffiti. Well, probably, of course. The question of purpose. But what was the actual purpose of the ominous shafts in the Queen's chamber? Why did the ancient Egyptians decide to make small passages that literally lead to nowhere? And for what reason were they sealed after their completion? If they were supposed to have been ventilation shafts, why did they not lead to the open air? An alternative theory is that they could have been the corridors through which the king's soul ascended to heaven. Thus, the corridors showed the pharaoh the way to the imperishable stars of the northern sky. But in order for the deceased to make this journey, there had to be false doors or ritual corridors. But if the shafts of the Queen's chamber served this purpose, either as actual burial corridors or as so-called model corridors, why do they end 15 meters from the outside? Wouldn't the pharaoh's soul then have come to a dead end? Moreover, for the ascent to the northern sky, there would have been no need at all for a corridor leading to the south. In fact, we know of no other pyramid that has such a corridor alignment. Furthermore, we should not ignore another important point. The pyramid texts, on which our assumptions about the afterlife of the ancient Egyptians are based, were handed down only 250 years after the construction of the tomb of Khufu. Unknown chamber. If and when the true background of the shafts will be uncovered, the future must show. However, it is certain that the Cheops pyramid is now richer by another chamber, or rather, by another riddle. As you have probably already noticed, the researchers recently succeeded in discovering a new, previously unknown cavity in the stone colossus. But the roots of this breathtaking find go back several years. Back in 2017, muon scans had revealed a hidden passage and hints of further chambers. The endoscopy-based investigations now provided evidence that the mysterious chamber does indeed exist. The endoscopic camera lens, which was carefully pushed through a gap between the stone blocks, revealed the amazing dimensions of the cavity. Located above the ancient entrance of the Cheops pyramid, the passage is 2.1 meters wide, 2.3 meters high, and 9 meters long. However, further discoveries were not granted to the experts here. The chamber is empty and was very likely not entered for 4,500 years. Despite all the missing traces, the real work of the experts has just begun. Accordingly, the task in the future is to find out what purpose the cavity might have once served. Even more exciting, however, is the question of what secrets might be hidden behind it. It is generally assumed that only 10% of the structure has been explored so far. Basically, it seems that the newly found room with its gable-shaped roof and its size, which is astonishing for the scientists, clearly stands out from the known pattern of corridors and chambers. In a cautious initial classification, the experts indicated that these circumstances suggest that, quote, something special lurks behind it. Accordingly, the special construction suggests that the cavity is intended to absorb the loads of the upper area in order to protect something that lies further back. We can all look forward to seeing what pyramid secrets are uncovered in the future.
The Pyramid of Cheops. Of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, only one was to successfully defy the gnawing ravages of time: the world-famous Pyramid of Cheops. With an original height of 146.59 meters and a side length of 230.33 meters, the monumental object was considered the tallest structure on our globe for a period of around 4,000 years. In view of these impressive dimensions, it should come as no surprise that the Cheops Pyramid is often simply referred to as the Great Pyramid. Researchers commonly assume that this is a magnificent tomb created in honor of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Cheops. He was in power during the 4th dynasty, and in detail, his reign should be between the years 2620 and 2580 BC. The only catch to the theory of the Great Pyramids being a tomb for Pharaoh Cheops is that, as far as we know, no Egyptians were ever buried inside of a pyramid. It has been a long-running theory among historians that the pyramids were built simply to be tombs for the ancient Egyptian leaders. However, this does not appear to be true. Despite years of research, there is virtually no evidence that the pyramids were designed to be tombs. On top of this, despite what you have been led to believe, there has never been a single mummy found inside of a pyramid. not one. Because of this, many people were looking toward other theories to explain the pyramids, with one of the more common theories claiming that the pyramids could have been giant power plants. But we will touch on that again later. The orientation of the Cheops pyramid is based exactly on the 4 cardinal points. In order to create the magnificent building, the builders of the time largely used the local limestone deposits, and granite was also used in some of the inner chambers. Although the Great Pyramid has remained in its basic form to this day, thousands of years ago it presented itself to viewers in a fundamentally different way. In fact, the structure was once completely covered with white Tura limestone, the top of which was adorned with the so-called pyramidion. This was probably made of granite or basalt. With its enormous dimensions and its magnificent appearance, the Cheops pyramid must have looked like a giant diamond in the middle of the hot desert. Unfortunately, however, the Tura limestone cladding was almost completely eroded and destroyed over the centuries. On the north side of the structure, we find the gate that once embodied the original entrance. In the belly of the mighty object, a complex chamber system was created, which consists of 3 main chambers: the rock chamber, the queen's chamber, and the king's chamber, with a sarcophagus that would have belonged to the former ruler. Although it's assumed that the mighty ruler Cheops was laid to rest here, there is no concrete evidence of this. In fact, as mentioned, neither a mummy nor valuable burial objects could be found in the Cheops pyramid, only objects that would have likely belonged to the king during his natural life. It is claimed by experts that greedy tomb robbers plundered the Great Pyramid a few centuries ago, ultimately leaving behind nothing but an empty sarcophagus. But this has not been proven. The history of the chamber system also repeatedly causes heated discussions in the ranks of the experts. Accordingly, their functions could never be properly deciphered. Basically, it's believed that the orders of the chambers were closely linked to the religious beliefs of the era. In detail, the ancient Egyptians believed that their deceased king first had to follow a certain path in order to be able to ascend to the kingdom of heaven, from the immortal stars, through the land of light, and finally to the kingdom of the sun god Re. Though yet again, we don't have much evidence that the pyramids were used for religious purposes either. To put it plainly, we don't truthfully know much about these pyramids at all. They were almost never mentioned in the pieces of ancient Egyptian history that have been collected so far. Because of this, we are left to piece together the puzzle of what could have transpired thousands and thousands of years ago, leaving us with far more questions than answers. The enigma of the burial chamber. Given that the Great Pyramid of Giza is commonly thought of as a monumental tomb meant to represent the power and influence of King Cheops beyond his death, one fact seems downright puzzling. Save for the empty coffin, which is located in the king's chamber, there is nothing to indicate that a burial actually took place here. But the shape of the actual burial chamber also repeatedly raises great mysteries. Instead of rich wall decorations and impressive inscriptions, we find nothing here but a cold, barren room. Did such a Spartan chamber really do justice to one of the most important pharaohs of antiquity? The only ancient Egyptian inscription, which for a long time was thought to be the only one inside the Cheops pyramid, has always been suspected of being nothing but a brazen forgery. When the British Howard Vyse, a soldier and Egyptologist, inspected the Pyramid of Cheops in the 19th century, he used the most unusual means to uncover additional chambers inside the structure: gunpowder. When Vyse had discovered or blown up the previously hidden rooms, he was presented with a very strange sight. Several inscriptions have been discovered inside the relevant chambers, which look like traces of ancient graffiti. In detail, these were various markings, directions, and the supposed names of those working groups that had created the Great Pyramid. Interestingly, the corresponding writing contained different variations of the pharaoh's name: Khufu, which we now call Cheops. In addition, all chambers uncovered by Vyse showed so-called quarry marks. In fact, the mysterious discoveries that the Briton made in the belly of the pyramid were supposed to be the proof that the rest of the scientific community has accepted to this day, that it was in fact the final resting place of King Cheops. The only account linking the pharaoh to the Great Pyramid of Giza again came from the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. He traveled to Egypt at the time of the first Persian rule, and thus more than 2,000 years after the construction of the Pyramids of Giza. The knowledge that the historian gathered about the magnificent buildings was received mainly from officials, priests, and Greeks who had settled in Egypt. The explanations that later found their way into Herodotus's histories are likely to have been a mixture of personal descriptions, incorrect traditions, and possibly made-up stories. Despite this difficult source situation, most researchers of our modern day are certain that the mighty pyramid was actually built in honor of Cheops. However, a few experts disagree with this general assumption. For them, there is simply not enough solid evidence to support the thesis they are proposing. Unanswered questions and unbelievable theories. But not only the original purpose of the mighty Cheops pyramid, but also its previous construction phase is still overshadowed by many questions among experts. Above all, this includes the question of how the ancient Egyptian workers managed, without the use of modern technologies, to pile up the thousands upon thousands of blocks, weighing tons, to form a coherent structure. In this regard, the experts are of the opinion that the inhabitants of the pharaonic kingdoms used sophisticated ramp systems. However, it has not yet been possible to decipher which ramps were used in detail. While there is hardly any evidence of this in the case of the Cheops pyramid, the remains of ramps have already been discovered near other pyramids. However, the respective finds prove that the Egyptians by no means used the same ramp systems for each of their pyramids. Just as the individual pyramids differed from each other, the individual construction phases would have also presented themselves differently as well. Whether the Egyptians used straight, spiral, zigzag ramps, or a combination of these forms to build the Pyramid of Cheops is still the subject of controversy and numerous attempts at reconstruction. If one follows a heavily disputed theory from the ranks of the pre-astronauts, then the search for an answer to the question of the building techniques of the ancient Egyptians is, however, already obsolete from the outset. According to the followers of this parascience, it was not the inhabitants of the ancient kingdoms of the pharaohs at all, but conceivably other beings who created the magnificent pyramids, extraterrestrial visitors. In the past, they would have made regular detours to our blue home planet. Since the aliens were vastly superior to the ancients from a technological point of view, they were worshipped as supernatural deities by the people of Earth. However, the pyramids of Giza themselves are supposed to serve as supposed proof of this almost unbelievable theory. For example, the Swiss Erich von Däniken thinks it's unthinkable that the ancient Egyptians, who he considers primitive, were able to create such demanding building projects as the pyramids. The logical conclusion of the parascientist and his colleagues is that the Egyptian master builders had received galactic help. The followers of this trend also have an answer ready for the shapes and the true purpose of the pyramids. The buildings are intended to imitate the abilities of the extraterrestrial beings. Since the home planet of the aliens is so far away from us that the flight to Earth took several thousand years, the extraterrestrial life forms could be put into a kind of hibernation during their journey through space. Arriving on Earth, it must have appeared to the ancient Egyptians as if the deities had just risen from the dead when they emerged from their galactic hibernation. The ancient Egyptian belief in the afterlife, including mummification, is said to have been based on these apparently supernatural observations. In the hope of rising again after death, the pharaohs are said to have allowed themselves to be mummified and stored in crisis-proof buildings, the pyramids, in order to finally awaken as gods as well. In fact, however, many people often tend to grossly underestimate the intellectual and cultural abilities of our ancestors. At the same time, such theories also exclusively consider the Cheops pyramid, while the ancient Egyptian pyramid development in its entirety is often left out. At the end of the day, we really don't know too much about the pyramids of Egypt. Historians and researchers often like to include their own interpretation in their work, rather than relying purely on science, reason, and evidence. Because of this, the true purpose of the pyramids and why they were built has often been overshadowed by theories that were concocted by historians many years ago, dating back to the 1800s. In reality, the pyramids could have served virtually any purpose, with some believing that the pyramids may have even been used to harness the power of the sun. One piece of evidence that helps to back up this claim is the Dendera light. This refers to a hieroglyphic that was found in ancient Egypt that seems to depict a few ancient Egyptians holding up a very large light bulb. It may seem crazy that the ancient Egyptians could have had access to a modern power source, but this hieroglyphic certainly seems to prove that there was much more to the Egyptians than meets the eye. While this is admittedly nothing more than a theory, It certainly makes you wonder what the ancient Egyptians could have been capable of. If the possibility of the Egyptians having access to a modern light bulb wasn't crazy enough, take into account the Baghdad Battery. This refers to a strange type of supposed battery that was found buried in Baghdad that dates back nearly 2,000 years. The supposed battery was created using a terracotta pot that had been packed with a rolled copper sheet, an iron rod, and some form of electrolytic fluid. The copper sheeting and the iron rod were insulated from one another using bitumen from the Dead Sea. Considering Egypt isn't too far from Baghdad, it's entirely possible that these batteries could have been commonplace all those years ago. If so, and the Egyptians figured out a way to harness the power of the sun using the pyramids, it's entirely possible that the ancient Egyptians were far more advanced than we give them credit for.
The Screaming Mummy. When we have to say goodbye to a loved one, we are left with only one hope. The person has found peace and is now in a better place. However, things are a little different in the case of the disturbing mummy that was tracked down in the ancient necropolis of Deir el-Bahari. On the lips of the deceased has burned, namely an eternal, mute death cry. If we now take a look at the other mummies, which were always buried with closed mouths and in straight posture, a realization arises. The wide open mouth, the head tilted to the right, and the bent legs can simply not be a coincidence. So, what led to the screaming mummy being laid to rest in this grotesque manner? Did she meet the same fate as Pentawar? Also recovered at Deir el-Bahari, we are dealing here with the son of Ramses III. However, the royal scion came under suspicion of plotting against his father, which is why he was forced to take his own life. Subsequently, Pentuar's body was not mummified, but wrapped in sheepskin. He was thus considered impure and had booked a free ticket to hell. To crack the mystery of the screaming woman, Zahi Hawass and Sahar Salim subjected the mummy to a CT scan. The results of the scan indicated that the woman died in her 60s and that she was actually very honorably mummified. After removal of the internal organs and treatment with precious resins and perfumes, her body was carefully wrapped in pure linen. Therefore, experts suspect that the circumstances of the unknown woman's death were different from Pentuar's. In addition, the results of the computer tomography revealed that the dead woman was struggling with severe atherosclerosis, that is, the pathological storage of fats in the arterial blood vessels. Consequently, it is conceivable that the screaming mummy succumbed to a heart attack. The so-called Papyrus Ebers shows that the ancient Egyptians were well aware of the symptoms of an approaching heart attack, even though they referred to it as Wad disease. Regarding the woman, the study concludes that she died suddenly of a heart attack, and in the very posture that she still exhibits today. The deceased probably lay in this position for a long period of time before it was discovered. Since the muscles and joints had already stiffened by this time, it was not possible to move the body into the usual burial position. The Lion Tomb. In November 2019, the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities announced a sensational discovery. Experts have found a gigantic number of ancient artifacts and mummified animals in Saqqara. The special thing? The animal burial site also contained the rare remains of at least 2 lion cubs. The bottom line is that the find included 75 cat statues and 25 decorated wooden boxes containing the mummified bodies of the quadrupeds. In addition, the researchers recovered figurines of birds, bulls, and a mongoose. Crocodiles, cobras, and scarabs were also among the mummified animals. Completed by numerous statues of gods, amulets, scrolls, drawings, and death masks, the Egyptian Minister of Antiquities described the trove as so rich that it alone could fill an entire museum. An object bearing the royal name, Sebenetich I, dates the artifacts to the 26th dynasty, that is, to the period between the years 664 and 610 BC. The discovery of 5 mummified cats of prey caused a particular stir. 2 of them should have turned out in context of a CT scan as lion cubs, which died at the age of 8 months. What made it special? This was the first time ever that a fully preserved lion mummy was discovered in Egypt. What began as the offering of sacred sacrifices in the form of animal mummies soon developed into a veritable industry. For example, millions of cats and dogs were bred in ancient Egypt specifically for ritual mummification. Bloody trophies. The fact that ancient corpses are recovered in ancient Egypt is, in and of itself, not yet a rarity. However, what the experts found on the site of a former palace in the ancient city of Arus was clearly different from anything that had gone before. Instead of a classic burial chamber, the researchers found 4 pits in which someone had placed 16 chopped-off hands. 2 of the pits, located in front of the presumed throne room, contained 1 hand each. The remaining 2 pits, located at a slightly later date, again contained the 14 remaining hands. The detailed analysis showed that the body parts were buried about 3,600 years ago, that is, at a time when the palace was used by King Shahan. In detail, we are dealing with a ruler from the ranks of Hyksos. This group of foreign rulers was in power in Egypt for over 100 years. But what was the background to this appalling practice? What is certain is that the cutting off of hands was subject to a fixed pattern, without exception. These were right hands, carefully cut off and placed in such a way that they were noticed by everyone. And even if we do not know from whom the hands originated, it is considered certain that cutting off the right hand was a practice carried out by both the Hyksos and the Egyptians. Thus, cutting off the hands not only facilitated the counting of defeating enemies, but also fulfilled a symbolic purpose. One took away the opponent's strength and power. While this gruesome find represents the first physical evidence of this ritual being performed, it has been mentioned before in some ancient Egyptian writings and artwork. One of these accounts is found in the tomb of Amhos, an Egyptian officer who fought against the Hyksos. It states, "Then I seized an enemy, and I brought a hand, so that it was reported to the royal herald." For his efforts, Amhos was again awarded the Gold of Valor. The Gold Mummy. In January of this year, an exciting entry was added to the list of ancient Egyptian mummy finds. In the necropolis of Saqqara slumbered the remains of a man named Hatshepsut, who lived around the year 2300 BC and was placed in a limestone sarcophagus after his death. Furthermore, his arms and legs had been individually wrapped to give the body a lifelike appearance. At the same time, the head was painted with eyes, a mouth, and dark hair. Even more striking, however, are the golden leaves that create the illusion of sparkling skin. If one follows ancient Egyptian beliefs, gold was the color of the gods. Accordingly, the gilding of the bodies represented the idea that the dead attained divine qualities in the afterlife. Thus, Hatshepsut's relatives could take comfort in the fact that he would be reborn and rejuvenated in the kingdom of heaven, and henceforth enjoy his favorite food and drink with the gods for all eternity. In a nearby tomb, archaeologists also discovered a group of well-preserved limestone statues representing men, women, and children. Such figures, which only the wealthiest members of society could afford, were placed in the tomb as reserve bodies. They could be inhabited by the so-called Ka after death. Ancient knowledge. Have you ever wondered how it is even possible for us nowadays to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics? After all, the ancient characters have not been used for centuries. The fact that we are still able to reveal the wisdom, beliefs, and rituals of antiquity is probably thanks to a clumsy horse. According to a story, on July 15, 1799, the horse stumbled over an unusual stone that was half sticking out of the ground. French officer Pierre-François Xavier Bouchard, who was on the horse's back, then identified the stumbling stone as a fragment of an ancient Egyptian stele. The special thing, since the so-called Rosetta Stone contained inscriptions in 3 different languages, researchers were henceforth able to match the hieroglyphs with ancient Greek and demonic texts, revolutionizing the translation of mystical symbols. The Rosetta Stone thus marks a groundbreaking find that also helps us understand the 16-meter papyrus roll found in a sarcophagus at Saqqara. A papyrus of this size and quality had not been discovered in over a century. The restored contemporary testimony, dating from 50 BC, contains passages from the Egyptian Book of the Dead and was on display at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The funerary text, which was buried with the deceased in his tomb, contains explanations, hymns, and spells to help the deceased master the treacherous journey to the afterlife. Furthermore, we also find illustrations that show us the journey of the soul through the underworld, as well as the different deities that the deceased encounters on his way. Consequently, the Book of the Dead embodies an important pillar of research, as it provides us with a detailed insight into the religious beliefs of the Pharaonic Empire inhabitants. And with that, thank you for watching our video all the way to the end. Feel free to leave us a thumbs up and a subscription to support us for free and stay up to date at the same time. Have a look at the other videos on our channel, which we have linked for you in the credits. But now, we need your opinion. Which of the featured discoveries fascinated you the most? Do you think we'll ever be able to unlock all the secrets of ancient Egypt?